I have also been in Pakistani Nautical Complex, Camera, and recently I joined Satuma. I've taught undergraduate and graduate courses in mechanical engineering, avionics, and mechatronics engineering at Yale University and JCSF University. Besides that, I'm also an entrepreneur, technology entrepreneur, and technology evangelist. I've founded several startups. Not all of them were successful, but the current ones are going good. I'll show some of the videos at the end. I'm also the founding faculty advisor to many competition teams, which include the Formula Students team at DHSFR. I'm also the chair of the Unmanned Aerial Systems Challenge, US Challenge, held every year in the UK. And last year, our team from Pakistan won the Grand Champion at the US Challenge in the Wales. Okay, so this is my current company. It's called Satuma, which is surveillance and target drones manufacturers. The website is given. You can look at. You can have a look at our work later. Okay, so that was briefly about myself. I'll go into what are unmanned aerial vehicles. So this is something that this word drones is very common today, and it's used for all the right and wrong reasons. So basically, what is a drone? It's a flying vehicle which is robotic, which means there is no person who is riding inside the aircraft. It is unmanned. No person is carried as the pilot or the crew. It might, however, carry people as a cargo. But it's not only a robot which is flying, it's actually much more than that. Drones or unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. For example, you might have rotary wing UAVs. I mean, if you look at this one, it's like a conventional aircraft, conventional helicopter. If you look at this one on the left, it's a multi-copter, what you know as a quadcopter. And this is something very recent which has come up. If you look at the middle picture, which is this one, if I may go to the pointer. Yeah, if you look at this picture, this has drones of all sizes. So, I mean, if you look at the size of them, they vary from the bigger ones to the smaller ones. And the one on the right is the famous Predator. This is something which has a span of around 30 feet or more, and it flies continuously for a day or more, and it can go up to a ceiling of several tens of thousands of feet. So the scale is varying, as you can see, from the very small handheld drones to the very big drones, which are bigger than the F-16 and sometimes bigger than the Boeing 747. Okay, so we said that UAVs or drones are robots which fly, or flying robots. But let's first discover what are robots. The robot is basically a machine which is programmable, and it is able to carry out certain actions automatically, which means it's doing it on its own. There's no human string or human which is controlling it through some mechanism or some linkage or some strings or something. Yeah, so it's doing it on its own. So a very important concept in robotics is autonomy. How autonomous it is. I'll just tell you in a moment what does autonomous means. Autonomous means that there is no human input. Once the machine starts, a human has to turn it on, or another machine can turn it on. After that, it remains on its own. So there is no human input required. So the question is a drone autonomous? And we'll answer that in the next slide. Robots, by virtue of being robots, why did humans invent robots? Is to do things which are too dull, something which is too repetitive. For example, if you are a person who is working in a factory which is making cars, and your only duty on the production line is to drill a hole or to tighten a screw or to paint a door, and you are doing it you're doing it throughout your shift of, let's say, 8 hours. So during the 8 hours, You're just tightening 4 or 5 screws, and that is your only job. So people discovered that as time goes on, humans become, because of the monotony and the lack of change and variation, humans become dull and they start underperforming. So tasks which are dull are generally relegated to robots. This is why they were first created in the auto industry. Then tasks which are dirty. For example, you are talking about handling laundry, or handling or mopping the floor, for example, or dealing with grease and oils, which gets your hands dirty, which gets your clothes dirty. It's also a bit dangerous, right? It's also not good for health. So in those tasks, people or scientists and engineers, they came up with robots which can do it on their own. And finally, tasks which are dangerous, tasks which if I do as a human, I am putting my life or my limb in danger. So these three Ds define the basic need of a robot. This is the original need of the robot, and then it went on for other things as we've discovered. So the other question now we need to ask is this the case with UAVs and drones? Are they used for tasks which are D, D, and D? And are they autonomous? So two questions which we'll try to answer to find out what's a UAV. So this finally develops into a question that are drones just robots that fly, or are they much more than that? Okay, so before I answer that question, let's come to the many applications of drones, and this will prepare you for the exciting career that you can have in drones, the immense benefits that come with going into learning aerospace, learning about drones, being able to build them and building applications around them. So the military use of drones is again driven by the same concept: dull, dirty, and dangerous. So, for example, if you're trying to, you are a pilot who has to fly a mission which is, let's say, 24 hours long, who can keep up awake for that long, who can keep attentive for that long, even if you are working in shifts, even if you have a team of 4 pilots. Think of the extra burden that you are taking on because of the amount of pilots that you need to change every cycle. So long missions up to 2 days are now available with military drones. So that is something which is very dull. Reconnaissance. So for example, if you are in the middle of battle and your fortress or your camp is surrounded by enemies, then to be able to go outside and poke out your head from the turret or the dungeon or the bunker and find out what's happening around you, which is called situational awareness. That's very difficult to do by a human being. If you put yourself in harm's way, even if you are doing it by a manned aircraft, bringing the aircraft down to a sufficient level in which you can take photographs or to understand what's happening on the ground, that again puts you in harm's way of anti-aircraft fire or high tension wires or what have you. So again, this becomes dangerous for people to go out in those or soldiers to go out in those situations. So the other D is dangerous. Cargo delivery is also an application which is widely used in military drones applications. They are now carrying very heavy payloads with drones, and moving from one place to another. Again, this also requires a bit of danger to the human pilot and the crew when they have to deliver it and hover. For example, if it's a helicopter, it has to come down to a certain level. That becomes difficult. So, and the final thing is it's attack. I mean, if the drone carries something like a Hellfire missile, that's going to be pretty messy and it's going to be pretty dirty. It's again something that you can safely keep a human pilot away from. So this is the military applications. If you look at military drones, look at a few things. One is the top one over here is the Global Hawk, the RQ-4. It has a span of 40 meters, which basically translates to about 125 feet. It weighs 6.8 tons, around 7 tons of weight, and it has a maximum flying time of more than 2 hours. So it's basically around 2.5 days. And the unit cost of one such aircraft is a whopping $130 million. On the other hand, if you look at the Reaper or something like Predator, it costs a fraction of that, about $17 million, which is around the price of an F-16. It has a span of around 60 feet. It weighs around 2 tons or 2.2 tons, and it has a flight time of more than 14 hours. On the other side of the spectrum, you have, for example, the Luna. This is again something which Pakistan has in its inventory. This only weighs about 40 kgs. It has a flight time of 8 hours, and one unit costs around $0.3 million. So everything from $130 million to $0.3 million is available in the military market. And this has to be launched by a catapult. We'll come to what a catapult looks like. I'll show you one. This is a catapult that I developed in Pakistan. This is again a first project of its kind. We developed this entire system in Pakistan from scratch, and everything, even the pneumatic actuator, is built in Pakistan. This is something great that we did in just 1 year. And this shows that how Pakistani engineers and technicians can achieve what they want if they have the will to do so. And this aircraft, by the way, was also designed by me, and we have a few flight sorties of it now. It's a jet-powered drone. Okay. Finally, we have if you look at the cost comparison, even the smallest drone in a military application cost more than $40,000. Now compare its size; it's just 18 grams, which is something like 2 pennies stuck together. In 5 rupees ke 2 sikke, if you stick them together, probably this is the weight that we're talking about. It costs $40,000. If you look at a similar drone in the commercial market, such drones are available. They launch from your hand, and they can take pictures also. They cost something like $200. So look at the price comparison. So you can understand that once a thing becomes military qualified and has military applications and is related to the very high end of users, then the price tag increases significantly. So there's a lot of business to be done and a lot of capital to be earned in the military industry. On the other hand, we also have a plethora of civilian applications. So most civilian applications, on the other hand, are neither dull, nor dirty, nor dangerous, and we'll come to that. So why use drones? And we need to answer that question. So if you look at this, these are the biggest drone applications. One is aerial photography, and probably you have seen them on walimas and shadis. So this is taking pictures from the air. They are also used in entertainment now. Many movie houses and many production companies, they have their own fleet of drones, which are used for aerial shots and 4K type of HD aerial photography and movie making. You can see over here, this is a guy who is using it for a cop who is using it for law enforcement. You can track criminals, speeding cars, take the picture of the number plate and whatnot. Shipping and delivery, you can see it over here. Recently, Amazon applied this for deliveries. TCS is also thinking of doing it in the near future. Then I'll come to this application, geographic mapping. This is something that we have recently started doing in Pakistan. I have a startup which is actually doing this. Similarly, there is wildlife monitoring. You can find out where your herd of sheep is going, how many are missing from the pack, etc. And the tracking of them becomes much easier than doing it from a sheepdog. You can use them for search and rescue, finding out where people are stranded, getting them help. Also using precision agriculture. So now instead of doing flood pesticides or flooding the entire field with pesticides, which costs a lot and there's lots of wastage, you can actually do it on the affected areas. And you can also dispense seeds on the affected areas. This is again something that my company Situma does. It's also used for construction management. So let's go back to our question. Civilian applications are not dull. None of them is dull. I mean, I would like to do this for the whole day. I would also like to do this for the whole day. But why should I? It's neither dull, it's neither dangerous nor dirty. So the answer is it's to save money. Right? The answer is it's to save money. It's to avoid traffic jams, to cut time. So with this, I can treat a patch of 1 acre of land in about 10 minutes. If I were doing it by the manual thing, it would take me much longer, and it would probably cost me much more because I would be using a lot of pesticide. Excuse me. Okay. Also, if I'm delivering this by drone, I'm basically cutting out all the traffic. I'm not clogging the roads. I'm not causing traffic jams. I'm also not causing accidents on the road, at least. And it basically also saves money. I mean, if I were going to hire a person who was doing the same thing, it's going to take longer. It's also, it's also going to cost me more because I'm going to be paying for fuel and taxes and whatnot. So, but some applications are also dangerous, which are again, in civilian applications also you can put people in harm's way. And then, for example, we are doing some mapping in Balochistan, and there's law and order situation over there. So you can overcome this by putting just one station at a certain hill and doing the entire construction mapping or whatever you want from that station, which is well provided with security. Okay, so we come to the question that we raised earlier. Are drones autonomous? So the answer is yes and no. Some drones do not require any human intervention. So you just pre-program the task that it has to do. It has to go to a certain place, drop a certain payload, for example, or in this case, do mapping. So I'm just going to tell it, do the entire area from this point to this point, and do it in a grid. So it's going to go on like this and this and this. It's called the dawn mowing fashion. You can do that for the whole day, and you just need to give it an input of takeoff before takeoff. So from takeoff to landing, it's basically autonomous. It does not require any human input. Similarly, with this thing, which is an agriculture drone, you just tell it the area to spray, and it's going to program its own path. It's going to find out which areas to spray, how to avoid obstacles, when to come down when the battery is low, when to sound an alarm, etc. This is all pre-programmed in this. You don't need to intervene. So there are some drones which are what we call fully autonomous. Sometimes, however, you need a human operator, which needs to redirect drones, and it needs to take decisions which a human being is not going to take. So, for example, if you want to do search and rescue, and you want to go and revisit an area again, so you need to tell the drone, keep searching this area. I want to have a closer picture. So the human is now in the loop, not in flying the drone, but in telling the drone where to go. Because if the human was actually using a remote control to do that, it's no longer a drone. It's basically just a remote controlled site. So an RC is very different from a drone. A drone does not need a radio link. It does not need. It might need a radio link, but the human pilot is not actually flying using the controls per se. It's just telling it where to go, how high to go, etc. And that can be done from a mouse over here or from a joystick, whatever the pilot is or the human operator is interested in. Similarly, in photographs, you have seen people use them because it's the artistic touch only comes from the human being. He knows which angles to take picture from, how to pan it out, zoom it in, things like that. So finally, I'll come to what are the technologies which are used in a typical drone. So if you look at this drone, this is just the structure. It looks very simple. It's basically a carbon fiber rod which is going over here, a motor which is running a propeller over here. This is maybe made in carbon fiber or fiberglass, something very light, maybe even in some balsa wood. But that is not the heart of the drone. The heart of the aircraft these days, even for manned aircraft, is the electronics. it's no longer very relevant how efficient the mechanical design is, even though it is, but it's more efficient what type of electronics you can put inside. So in this case, there would be some servos. These are motors which are going to turn the control surfaces to make it go right, left, up and down, and faster and slower. And there's going to be a propeller which is controlled by what is known as an ESC, which is an engine speed controller. So it controls the speed of this propeller. Then, of course, there's going to be batteries which power up the entire contraption. There's going to be a GPS, which is the global positioning system, which tells the aircraft where it is right now. Then there is also the autopilot, which has a lot of sensors inside, which tells it, is it banked right, banked left? Is it pitching up, pitching down? What sort of attitude it is? Does it have? What height is it flying at? Because GPS are not very good on giving you the height. So a lot of computations. It's basically a computer which is controlling this entire thing, and this computer is probably 100 grams or 5 coins stuck together. You might also have a camera which has a memory. It will also have some telemetry links which gives data, which gives data to the aircraft. Similarly, you have a GCS, which is the ground control station. You can modify the mission on the go. Okay, so in a bigger aircraft, for example, now you will have a bigger flight control computer because the aircraft is more critical. It will have 3 sets of Hall sensors. We call them triple redundant. The flight control computer will only decide how to fly the aircraft. The mission, which is controlling this payload, which is in this case it's a camera, is done by something else. It's called the mission and payload control computer. You will have separate communication systems. So over here, everything is in this small debris, in this small box, because you're cutting cost, you're cutting weight. But over here, your cutting cost is not the feature over here. The design feature over here is to make it safe and to make it reliable, right? So your costs go. You can see why this costs much smaller, much lower than this, because the amount of electronics that is going up, the type of hardware which is used, the type of materials which are used in making them, the structure, the mechanical parts, the aerospace, the aerodynamic design, it's much different from this basic design. That is why the two have a lot of cost difference. It will also have not a telemetry antenna like this one. You can see this one. It will have a telemetry antenna something like this one. So the costs multiply. And this would probably be in a big truck, in which a few humans can be there. Okay, so a very important question which people often ask is, are drones taking over human jobs? And the answer is again yes and no, because some of the jobs that they're taking over are D, and D, dull, dirty, and dangerous. In that case, yes. They are taking over the jobs. However, this does not mean that humans are going to be jobless, because the jobs that the drones are taking over need not be done by the humans. However, you need people to make the drones. You need people to control them. You also need people to program them. You need people to make smart innovations around them, and that is where the job market is needed. So instead of being basically a crew member or a flight steward, you can also think about being a drone pilot or a drone technician. Much of aviation today is controlled by computers. Even the manned aircraft you can see over here, there are autopilots here. There are a lot of instrumentation panels over here. Just because they came on board did not make the humans redundant. They just moved on to more smarter jobs than putting their hand on the stick all the time. Which basically means that we as students, researchers, and business people need to live with the time. We need to move along with the time and to come up with smart solutions which are sellable. So in the end, I'll just give a few motivating examples. When I came back to Pakistan from Saudi, we did not have a lot of funding. We basically started ideas in my university as final year projects or capstone projects. We actually developed Asia's third hybrid rocket engine, again, something which we did in around 25,000 to 40,000 rupees. I don't remember the exact cost, but all of these intricate parts were made in local shops, and we were able to fire and sustain the combustion. We are able to make small UAVs. Again, this is a crude version, but we are able to fly this for a long time. We are also able to make catapults. This was a student project which we scaled it up to the picture that I showed you. They also made some turbojet engines, some liquid engines, liquid rocket engines, and let me stop the pointer. Okay, and this is something that we recently did, which is basically a mapping drone, and this is flying in Kurandi. Okay, I'll end my presentation over here and stop sharing my screen and turn on my camera.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Bilal. It was very exciting and very heartening to see what you have done for the country and obviously for aviation. And a lot of people thought when Industrial Revolution came in, they said this tractor is going to make people jobless because all the farmers will go out of job. So I think it's the same thing. It didn't. The entire efficiency increased everywhere. So I think this is going to do the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think when the robots were first introduced in the automaking industry or the car industry, this is the same apprehension that people had, that the robots are going to take over. You won't have any workers on the shop floor or the assembly lines, and people are going to get fired, or the robots are going to take over the world. And it did not happen. And what happened was there were more jobs which were created because of the robots, and people actually started getting less sick and less prone to error. The cars became much more sturdier. You had more people who were working, repairing the robots, getting them to work, designing better robots. So what happened was, it transformed the perception of what a job could be. And this is what I always tell students, and also people who are involved in business, that unless you innovate and unless you get ahead of the curve, you are always going to be jobless. So joblessness is not a function of where the technology is. Joblessness is a function of whether you have kept up with the times or whether you are behind. I'll just share with you what I recently heard Jack Ma said. I don't know whether most of you know him, but Jack Ma is the person who made Alibaba. And he was, or she said that where we are today is because of what we started 15 years ago. So he had this vision of Alibaba 15 years before it hit the market. And he said, I'm not worried about the next 3 years. I know that I'm going to be in the market as a leader for the next 3 years. But what I'm worried about is the next 10 years. Because in 10 years, if I don't innovate right now, and if I don't start making a new market, I'm going to be out of the market. And again, aviation is most happening industry. It's always the industry which gave birth to, for example, carbon fiber, the industry which gave birth to adaptive control, to all type of fuzzy control, for example, optimal control, and because this is my field, and materials which are cutting edge. Some grades of aluminum were specifically made for aerospace. So aerospace is probably the most happening thing. If you cannot find a job in aerospace after being an aerospace engineer or an aviation manager, this means there is something wrong with you, not with the system, because you did not keep up with the times.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bilal. It was a pleasure having you with us, and hopefully we expect people to register for a workshop with you sometimes in the next few weeks or months.
Sure.
Thank you very much again.